Good evening, everyone. Are you able to hear me? Incredible. I know we've been sitting for quite a while, so feel free, shake it out a little bit, whatever. That was an instruction, like whatever you need to do. My name is Ren Birnholz. I use they, them pronouns, and I am here. I am so incredibly honored to be here today. Yesterday morning, I attended a march in downtown Boston where the crowd shouted, "We are here, we are queer, and we will not live in fear." In the Jewish tradition, which is my tradition, we have a word, hineni, and it holds immense power. When God asks Adam, Moses, and many other prophets and Jewish figures where they are, they respond, hineni, I am here. It is more than just like taking attendance, I'm here. It's the statement that their presence is felt, a personal claim to the literal space and the metaphorical space that they take up, a response stating that they are prepared, listening, and ready to engage. Hineni, I am here. I'm here standing before you a month before I graduate with my undergraduate degree. Countless members of the audience are people that I consider family, a community of care that I have been so lucky to cultivate at my time here in Boston. I'm standing here with loving parents and siblings and other family members, mostly across the country and Florida as well as elsewhere, who've been cheering me on since day one. And I'm standing here before you incredibly privileged. I'm able-bodied, I have access to stable housing and food, and I am white. I am living in a country that was quite literally built for me and my being in so many different ways. And I am here in a state that has legally protected access to abortion and has countless treatment centers where myself, as well as many other trans people, have had access to HRT or hormone replacement therapy, which quite frankly has been life-saving. I'm also here as a practitioner of reproductive justice. During my first week at Northeastern, I have joined NU Share, or the Sexual Health Advocacy Resources and Education Club. It's not just a group of college students that sit around and talk about sex and sexuality, although that'd be great, but that's all it was. But I'm so lucky and proud to call us a community of people dedicated to sharing the knowledge about sex ed with our peers, creating safe and accountable spaces to ask hard questions and interrogate stigma, and making tangible change to improve the lives of the people of Boston and at a smaller scale Northeastern, access to reproductive health care for all students and the larger Boston community. During my tenure as president, which was the 2 years prior, I led the initiative to install a wellness vending machine on NU's Boston campus. With the support from our health center and our Office of Prevention and Education, as well as so many Zoom calls over the summer. That fun, I'm in India, so I'm quite sweaty. It was very hot. It was really like countless hours of advocacy. We now have a wellness vending machine in Marino Atrium, which is our gym at Northeastern's campus that's open to the public with subsidized $7 Plan B and emergency contraceptives, as well as free safer sex supplies. I also have had the opportunity to represent NU Share at the White House in October 2022 at one of Vice President Kamala Harris's, oh no. Oh, there we go. Sorry about that. Vice President Kamala Harris's Reproductive Rights Roundtable. Myself, along with 74 other students and student activists from across the country, shared our experiences and our stories, as well as the demands for what needs to change. Not what we wanted to change, what needs to change. During this roundtable, I asked, access to abortion is indisputably a women's rights issue, but it is not only a women's rights issue. Women have historically led the efforts to access to abortion, and it disproportionately impacts cisgender women, but we cannot forget that this issue also impacts members of the transgender and gender nonconforming communities. Currently, the Biden administration only acknowledges that the overturning of Roe v. Wade impacts women. How will the Biden administration include transgender people, particularly trans men and other individuals with the capacity to be pregnant, in their response and initiatives to provide access to abortion? Rachel Palermo, the Deputy Communications Director of the VP, said that she wasn't sure, and she gave me her email and asked me to contact her. So I did. I emailed her a few months ago, and on Friday of this week, I got a response asking to continue the conversation, and I'm so incredibly excited. I'm not good with these slides. But my work as a sex educator and reproductive justice practitioner are inherently tied to my trans identity. I'm transgender, non-binary, gender expansive, and gender fluid. I came out about 2 years ago and started medically transitioning using HRT about a year ago. I'm not certain if I've always been transgender. Gender is fluid and a social construction, but now to hold this title, this label, this identity, has been a source of infinite power. My gender-expansive elders of different eras, continents, philosophies have paved the way as activists, healers, parents, leaders in their communities. And I'm standing before you here. I am here as a proud trans person, a proud person with a uterus, a proud sex educator, and a proud young person. And I'm standing here before you, scared. 9 months ago, on June 25th, 2022, Roe v. Wade was overturned by the Supreme Court, the highest court in our land. Later that evening, I gathered with hundreds of people marching to the Massachusetts State House shouting, "My body, my choice." Millions of people lost access to abortion instantly that day as trigger laws went into effect. And in the months to follow, 12 states have outlawed it completely, with 6 others having it completely inaccessible or severely restricted. On Friday, Wyoming outlawed medical abortion. Yesterday, I walked that exact same protest route, with shouting the exact same words, "My body, my choice." The cheers reverberated, and then someone else in the crowd started shouting, "His body, his choice. Their body, their choice. Her body, her choice." Another person shouted, "Trans healthcare saves lives." On Thursday, Florida, my home state, passed a ban making gender-affirming healthcare for anyone under the age of 18 illegal. And on March 4th, just a couple of weeks ago, Michael Knowles, a well-known political commentator at the Conservative Political Action Conference, said that for the good of society, transgenderism must be eradicated from public life entirely. As I shouted, "My body, my choice," I was claiming my transness, my existence. The way I lived out my identity is mine to choose, mine to explore, mine to love, and mine to live in joy. These protests were in the same place with the same chance. And yet the people there were different for the most part. And my question is why? We were both gathering in response to legislation written and passed by white, cisgender, heterosexual men. These politicians are often also financially privileged, which is how they had the means to run for a campaign and often win a seat in the legislature. We were both advocating for access to medical procedures that should be up to an individual's discretion, procedures that the aforementioned politicians, if they have enough money, will have access to no matter the legality. We were both fighting for bodily autonomy, something that is our basic human right and feels almost like they're trying to create a distraction when it's up for grabs the way that it is. And as a result, because it is our bodily autonomy that is at stake, our battle and tactics must be embodied. Hey, Nanny, this is my reclamation of space that I take up, and my challenge for you to take up this space, to find your voice and then figure out how you're going to use it to help in this fight. Hi, my name is Ren Birnholz, and I use they, them pronouns. And today I'm here to imagine with you how we build a coalition that bridges 2 extremely strong movements together. I found this quote, and my first reaction was, darn it, Alok Vad Menon is one of my heroes. They are a gender nonconforming writer and performing artist, and they said everything in this quote that I've been trying to put together in this speech for literally months, like instantly, and they said it so well, better than I ever could. I'll read the quote for you now. In popular culture, abortion rights and trans rights get discussed as separate phenomena. But actually, trans justice is reproductive justice, and reproductive justice is trans justice. And that's not just in terms that there are trans people who have and continue to need access to abortions, which needs to be stated, but it's actually about the meanings of gender that both of these conservative projects rely on. I believe this quote lays the groundwork for how we build this coalition. So let me explain it one step at a time. To start, what is gender? I'm taking like audience. What is gender? Oh, wow, I love it. Silence. No, I'm kidding. The National Institute of Health defines sex as biological variable and gender as a social and cultural variable consisting of identity, roles and norms, relations, and power. Paisley Kira, a scholar in the trans studies, states that sex, and I will add gender, is whatever an entity whose decision are backed by the force of law says it is. We often hear the phrase, gender is a social construct. In fact, you heard me say it like not even 5 minutes ago. The reality is that gender and sex are both social constructions, but that doesn't mean they're not real. In fact, both of these categories hold immense power in our lives, and they have very real impacts. Across time and different cultures, gender has been defined differently. It has been used to delineate and divide work, but it hasn't always impacted the social circles that we run in, and also hasn't been defined by a gender binary, with categories male and female. Also, what traits belong to what gender identity have completely changed over time. The creation of gender binary as we know it, is production of Western colonization. In European and later American legal traditions, gender difference was codified by the was codified in law to oppress women. Gender was constructed as a social and legal category, with women restricted to homes and out of public spaces. We see this struggle taken up by feminists of the 19th and 20th century, particularly with the activist movements for the right to vote and the rights to abortion. Nevertheless, though, the gender binary persists. As Sonia Renee Taylor, the author of The Body is Not an Apology, and I had a pleasure a couple of weeks ago to speak and moderate on a panel with her right on the stage, she points out, systems do not maintain themselves. Even our lack of intervention is an act of maintenance. Every structure in every society is upheld by the active and passive assistance of other human beings. The gender binary functions to maintain power in the hands of the patriarchy, and a specific patriarchy at that. This hegemonic masculinity, or the idea that there is one right type of way to be a man, and that is also innately defined, intertwined with whiteness and binary gender. Transness has existed throughout history. Kira points out by the second decade of the century, transgender has shifted from a largely off-the-radar residual category, even though it's existed, bobbing along in the wake of a much larger movement for gender equality before the law, to the newest proxy in the arguments over culture and belonging. As it has come into the public sphere, it has effectively been used as a scapegoat. Trans people threaten the status quo and the gender binary that keeps the hegemonic hierarchy in power. These two movements were carved out in response for the need to care caused by the establishment of the gender binary. The reason that trans people are such effective scapegoats for conservatives to prey on is because they're able to prey on fear. Only about 6% of the population as of 2015 know a trans person, allowing them to craft a caricature of who a trans person is. In Tennessee, they just banned the art of drag, which means they are literally giving a uniform to what a person is allowed to wear. And if you're about to say, no, I mean people can they're not allowed to wear things of the opposite gender, who decides what is gendered clothing? Fashion magazines? It certainly isn't biological, because I wasn't born wearing pants. The reinforcement of the gender binary does not serve anyone, and certainly not cis women. This is a map here of kind of recent legislation targeting specifically trans kids, and this is a map of abortion legislation and the current state of abortion laws in this country. Clearly, the gender binary is not serving anyone. This brings me to reproductive justice. Talked a little bit about trans justice, now we're going to reproductive justice. We're hitting all the high points. The reproductive justice movement was created by a group of black women in the 1990s, now kind of like ancestors of the group Sister Song. And they state as kind of the goals of the reproductive justice movement is a human right to own our bodies and control our futures. It is a human right to have children. It is a human right to not have children. And it is the right to parent the children we have in safe and sustainable communities. It's not just about abortion, it's about access and so much more. When Roe v. Wade was overturned, there was an outcry nationally. I heard so many feminists, particularly white feminists of the generation above me and the generation above that, saying, how could this happen? We fought for it already. And then I heard so many of my colleagues and ancestors and elders in the trans community, in the BIPOC community, saying we saw this from a mile off because they've been coming for us this whole time. Our bodily autonomy has constantly been threatened. And through all of this, there's such a push between the communities. There's an insistence by a lot of cis women that using trans-inclusive language will lessen the women. It's not a pie. Everyone needs to have access to these rights, and I'm not taking anything away from the women's rights movement by saying that trans people and trans men need access to abortions too. So what do we do now? Also, I just wanted to point out, if you look at kind of the similarities between those two sides of what states and where are people in the most need right now. First thing we do is that we can't treat transphobia, sexism, kind of all of the isms, as an hydra or some like ambiguous monster. We have to name the challenge, and then we have to address it. The top-down approach is not fast enough. We have to address it, but it can't be the end-all, and we have to embody the resistance. After all, it's our bodily autonomy that's at stake. Often the word activism is associated with a very specific image. People with signs camped outside the Supreme Court steps, or going door-to-door campaigning for a candidate, or running a nonprofit. And while all of these are forms of activism, they're a small part of the chain. They're those forms of the top-down activism where we're really targeting the institutions. Allow me to introduce the 5 forms of organizing as defined by Planned Parenthood. These forms are on a spectrum, from changing the relationships of power to serving immediate needs. However, the institutions themselves are embedded in the gender binary, and they share oppression of our bodily autonomy. We, the people, need to organize campaigns and actions in the face of immediate threats, such as the outlawing of drag in Tennessee or the outlawing of medical abortion in Wyoming. We need people to advocate, showing up at school forums and when states and school districts enact their own versions of the Don't Say Gay bill. And we need intergenerational education to have the patience to give the benefit of the doubt when people are taking a moment to understand pronouns. And we also need to be willing and open to understand that the way we understood the world for years, decades even, prior to this point is changing, and take the time to learn about new identities. During an interview about Trans Liberation and Social Justice Coalition, Alok said, "Freedom is something that has to be lived within you, and that freedom is our embodied resistance. We must take the time to care for ourselves." If you haven't caught on, I'm on the self-help one now. To truly know our limits, to carve out our boundaries, to question our own gender identities, our own identities in general, our complacencies and our struggles. Sonia Renee Taylor teaches us that we are living in a world full of body terrorism, where we are taught to hate ourselves and the vessels that we live in. Self-love is a radical act, and it should not be undermined. The media often focuses on the pain and suffering of marginalized communities. Whether you're part of one of those communities or not, you deserve to live a life full of joy. And so I really stress that taking care of yourself is a form of activism. And finally, we fight through direct service. We mobilize through mutual aid. At the start of the pandemic, I had the privilege of getting involved with NU Mutual Aid Group, and this is kind of a graph talking about the different ways that mutual aid functions. We build this through taking care of each other, by making sure that people have access to resources. We fight by getting to know your neighbors. Do you know the person sitting next to you? Do you know the person who lives next to you? Do you know the person who lives down the block? It's not super common nowadays to actually know the people around you. We are 8 of the 10 steps classified by kind of the legal institution that monitors genocides towards trans people in this country. They are coming after the most marginalized voices, and they're not going to stop. And the way that we fight this is by actually knowing the people around us. It's by taking someone, driving them to an abortion clinic if they need. It's by raising funds and redistributing wealth and donating to that PayPal or that GoFundMe. It's by making sure someone who needs access to HRT, checking in on them. I have so many people in this audience have called me while I've done my HRT shot, and that is a form of caring and trans justice and caring for your community. I also wanted to take a moment to give some examples of this activism. One is the wellness vending machine. Up there is Ali Nieto, who is my vice president. Well, now she's vice president, I'm no longer. But, and then the other one is SHARE, Self-Managed Abortion Workshop, which we're holding this Saturday. And that's one of the ways that we're empowering people to have the knowledge to do this work themselves if the institutions that we rely on take it away from us. This coalition is not one that you subscribe to and then get a monthly newsletter. It is one where you show up as yourself in your own life and in the lives of your community and the people around you, no matter how small or large, every single day, as an ally, as a participant, as a body, a voice, and a person. During the fall 2020 semester, I took a class entitled Black Feminist Studies, and it quite literally changed my life and my outlook. Huge shout out to Professor Jean-Charles. We read the works of the Combahee River Collective, a group of Black lesbians based in Boston who wrote a manifesto in the 1980s about how they will no longer sit down and they will fight for the bodily autonomy of Black women and Black lesbians in this area. They say that our liberation is a necessity, not as an adjunct to somebody else's, but because of our need as human persons for autonomy. Over the past few weeks, I've truthfully thrown out this speech over and over and over and over again, wanting to say the right words that would convince you of my plea to take action, that you will hear me and you will be convinced that building a coalition between the trans liberation movement and the reproductive justice movement is not only a necessity for our survival, but that you specifically are needed for this fight. I sat here with so many of my friends, particularly shout out to Blake and Jacob, as they have just sat with me as I've written this and struggled through it. And I think it came out all right, so thank you all for being here. We must dream of a bigger future. Sister's Song, the group I mentioned earlier that kind of created the language around reproductive justice, states in their mission, our vision is a future rooted in human dignity and worth, bodily autonomy, joy, love, and rest. I am here, I am trans, and I am a reproductive justice practitioner. We are here. In fact, on the count of 3, I would like you to say, I am here. 1, 2, 3.
I am here.
Yes, you are. Thank you for being here. Some of us are trans, some of us are cis. I would like to think we are all practitioners of reproductive justice and trans justice after this talk, maybe just a little bit. We have shown up in every color of the rainbow, every identity, and from every walk of life. But all of us are here, and we will not live in fear. Thank you.